Yes, it's Thursday and we're back again. Um, it's just I don't know. As we continue, we're going about a year and a half, a year and some change of being on the Black Podcast, and it's just been great. I really enjoyed the relationships that we have built over this time and the amount of knowledge that we've been able to pour into our community. Before we get started, it's so important that you do your part and share the videos. That's the whole purpose of the Black Podcast. So make sure, just because you may feel that this message or these stories may not pertain to you or your life, or you can't relate to them, you never know who's in your circle that may need to hear the stories of our guests on the Black Podcast. So please make sure that you're doing your part. I am one of the co-hosts, Dr. Sherelle Hobson, and my background is in education and athletics. And I've been doing that for about 16, 17 years, and enjoy every bit of it. But I realized that there were some challenges in the Black community pertaining to our young Black males that needed to be addressed. And so I was blessed and honored to have a partner here where we collaborated on a business called HSBA. And that's where we changed the narrative of our Black males within the Black community, and as well as education. So my partner here, Mr. Street. Ta-da! He's muted. Okay, so Mr. Street, his background is in social work and psychology. And so we just realized that there were some challenges that we saw within the Black community pertaining to our Black males that needed to be addressed. And we knew that in order for change to happen, we had to be the change. And so that's why we created HSBA and the Black Podcast. The Black Podcast is about showcasing and exposing our Black influencers, whether they're in education, professional sports, or whatever they're doing in their space, and being a positive influence. We knew that we wanted to create a platform that would help to expose those people that are in our Black community who are doing great things and who are also contributing to the community. And that's why we need to have more networks and platforms that showcase Black people, male and women, who are doing positive things in our community. So that is why it's so important that you share the video of this show, whether you're watching it now or you're watching it later. It doesn't matter. Share it on your social media, please. Make sure you share it, and go to YouTube and subscribe to our YouTube channel as well.
Yeah,
And so we have a special guest.
everything that she said, guys. Y'all have heard about me enough. She is just one of those great individuals I was able to connect with to be able to help put together the platform that we're using to go out and impact lives around the world. And we knew that, yes, I could do a lot. I could do a lot by myself. Yes, she could do a lot by herself. Yes, we could do a lot, the two of us, but we can do so much more, not only with our guests, but with all of you out there who are watching this and have some type of connection that is of relevance to the community that we're looking to serve. So off of that note, we are going to unveil the guest of today. Drum roll, please.
All
Dr.
right.
Brown, how's it going?
All right. How are you?
We're doing great.
Pleasure to be here. Pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invite.
Well, we are just so excited to have you. And when I sent the initial invite to you and you responded back, I said, "Thank you, Lord. He's real." So I'm just
Oh,
so glad.
wow.
I'm
Oh,
just
wow.
so glad that you
Yeah,
accepted the invite,
right.
because I know that this is a busy time for everyone, especially in education with finals and all these things going on. So I really appreciate you taking the time to
Absolutely.
be on, and we appreciate you taking the time to be on the Black Podcast. So thank you.
Yes.
Dr. Brown, so we know that behind every story or every glory is a story. And
Yes.
so we want to know more about you. We see all the great things that you're doing on your social media, on your LinkedIn, and everything that you're doing within your space. But we know that all that stuff started from somewhere. And so
Right.
we want to know a little more about you, your background, where you're from, and the dynamics of your family, how you grew up.
Right. So, again, thank you for this opportunity. I am Kevin Brown, born and reared in Hammond, Louisiana. I'm about 40 miles north of New Orleans. I had the pleasure of attending and graduating from Grambling State University with both my bachelor's degree as well as my first master's degree. Um, I graduated, well, I must admit that I graduated from Hammond High School in Hammond, Louisiana. I am from a family of five, or it's a total of five of us, as it relates to me and my siblings. I am number two. I grew up with both my mom and my father, and both my mom and dad were very particular or about education, or wanted to ensure that we did what was right as it relates to going to school, and they always talked about going to college. But not only my parents, but also in the neighborhood, also at church. You know, you heard about it, even though I didn't know what those letters were. I didn't know what they were talking about, but growing up, I always heard things about going to college. So after graduating from Grambling State University, I landed my first job teaching psychology. At my background is in psychology and sociology. My first gig was teaching psychology at Southern University in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and I left Southern to take a position in Racine, Wisconsin, and there I served as teacher and administrator at both middle school and high school in Racine, Wisconsin, to eventually leave for Madison, Wisconsin, again serving as an administrator of a middle school. I eventually moved to Columbia, Missouri, where I became the assistant superintendent of secondary education with a focus for all middle schools and high school. I always have taught college, right? So I've taught either sociology or psychology at both Southern University as well as Milwaukee Area Technical College in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I am currently the deputy superintendent of educational services in Proviso Township in Forest Park, Illinois. I'm about 10, 15 miles north of Chicago.
Wow, wow, an extensive amount of experience. So going back to where the dynamics of your family, um, were you involved in any kind of like any athletics, any activities in school? And then what were your conversations with your family pertaining to education? Were your parents also graduates, or who was? Can you go through that with
Yeah,
us?
yeah, absolutely. So as it relates to my family, my parents, especially my dad, he was very, very firm about academics. As a matter of fact, we remember in the 70s, you went home with your report card, and your parents had to sign your report card, right? But for some reason, however, I do know, but for some reason, a little firm, my dad would not sign our report card if we had C's on the report card, right? So, quote, he would view that as not appropriate, but I filtered when I said not appropriate. There were other stronger words that he used, uh, but C's were not accepted, right? He introduced us to a lot of Black history. He would like give us names. We had encyclopedias back then, you know, and he would give us names of people to look up and read about. And as a result of that, I was able to accumulate a lot of knowledge regarding African Americans and their contribution to our society. But I will also add too, though, that I had a very difficult upbringing because my dad was a severe alcoholic and an abusive alcoholic. So I was exposed to many aces, mother abuse, siblings, dad incarcerated, alcoholism, divorce, right? So many adverse childhood experiences that could have derailed me becoming Dr. Brown. Nevertheless, as a result of a strong community, a strong extended family, such as my uncles and my grandmothers, um, they were able to wrap around those services and fill those voids that we were missing as siblings, as a result of, mom in survival mode, all of us in survival mode, right, due to alcoholism. So, as an older man, I understand that it is an illness because my dad's dad also was an alcoholic. But I get to say that the five of us, we came out of that with scars. You don't come out of that without scars, but we were able to stop that alcoholism. We were able to stop that yuckiness, and we are able to say that our children have not been exposed to that violence, to that alcoholism, and to all the yuckiness associated in stereotypes and perception from the community from being exposed or to such hardship.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. So, when you talk about, a lot of my study was on African American males and the effects of athletics on their educational plans. But what I realized that a lot of our young men who are involved in athletics, um, or trying to get involved in something. It was almost like that was their only way out. Like that was their way out of their situation, or financial reasons, or whatever. What was it for you, going through, knowing that your father was still very focused on academics, but knowing that you wanted something else? What did you do in your going into high school,
Right,
on to college? What
right,
was your place that you
right.
used
So
to
what I did was I had the opportunity to latch on to see others in the community, others productive African Americans, such as my school teachers, such as my principals, and I remember as a young kid seeing them with these Greek letters, but I didn't know they were Greek letters. I just knew they were some funny letters, right? And I knew that when they came around, people stopped what they were doing. They were shooting dice, they were cursing, they stopped what they were doing when these guys came up, right? And I remember Professor Davis used to pick us up during election time for us to help pass out flyers and who to vote for. But when I got in his car, it was something different, but I thought it was raggedy. But I didn't know any better. But Brian, it was a diesel Mercedes, right? But I remember this wood grain, these seats, these plush seats with buttons in it, right? That impacted me, right? It was people in my immediate surrounding, Mr. Youngblood, Gibson, Porter, people in my neighborhood who were all teachers, Mr. Dillon, that I was able to latch on to because they had children my age, and I latched on to that, and I was able to see um, um, the benefits of going to a post-secondary institution. So I would say in the Black community, within the church, and then the friends that I selected, I latched on to some of the things that they were experiencing as African Americans that I was not experiencing, but yet I wanted to be like that.
Wow, wow. Well, thank you for that. So, as you transitioned out of high school, you talked about the amount of influence that your teachers had. What were you doing during that time, or what were they doing during that time that you realized, um, that you wanted to get into whatever major or college? What was that
Right.
conversation like in that transition for you?
Right. So as a result of having a significant amount of African American teachers and them understanding the value of post-secondary institution, it was always the conversation. It was always you better get your lesson, right? Whatever that means. Did you get your lesson? Um, um, uh, they, uh, they made sure, but not just your home, across the street, in the church, vacation Bible school. They always brought up college. You were exposed to it, right? And as a result of being born being reared in Louisiana, where you had Southern University, there you have Dillard's, there you have Xavier, you have Grambling, right? So many HBCUs. As a result of several HBCUs, many people in the community were college educated. So I latched on to those things. I saw those things. Those things impacted me indirectly, and I can say today directly.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that. We always talk about, especially on the show, that our communities have changed so much now. There was a time where I used to always, not so much where I grew up, but prior to me, I used to always hear about people saying, your neighbor could spank you, whoever, you can get in trouble by anybody's mama. It didn't matter.
Right.
Now we live in a community where it seems like parents and the community are more involved in the things that they're doing in their personal space, and or being more friends with our teens than being, you know disciplinarians and letting them know that, hey, if you're doing these certain things, I'm gonna let your mama know, but I'm still gonna handle it.
Right, right,
We've kind of lost touch of that, and
right.
now these
That's real.
kids are dealing with so much trauma,
Right,
like you dealt with, but you had the willpower to kind of, be a leader and know that you can do something different. Our kids these days, it seems like they're just followers. So when you talk about, well, you're a product of your environment, well, you may have been in the part of that environment, but you weren't a product of that environment if you change the cycle. But our kids, it seems like they have either lost the willpower or got lazy, or we've enabled them too much. They don't have a lot of the will to say, this is my current situation. Now, what can I do? So it is important that the community is involved. Because like you said, it takes a village, and that means everybody. If you see
everybody.
someone's child doing something wrong, if you see someone's uh, heading in the wrong direction, it's our responsibility within our community to pour into that child, to teach them something different. But I don't know what happened and where we lost that at, but we definitely have lost that, that type of influence in the community.
Honestly, I think you do know. I think we all know, but we're so encapsulated with how we came up that we sometimes are blinded to it. Is the fact that these are the new parents. These are the new role models. These are the new leaders. So when they go onto Instagram, they see their village there, and they want to be like that village. They want to be glorified and approved by those individuals. They post a picture, and that gives them instantly
Right,
gratification. Like,
right,
that is a person who I want to deal with because they like my picture.
right.
And and it's we got to get them at a young age, I feel. Sometimes in the work that I do, I typically work with like 13 and up. So I'm with the adolescents up into early adulthood. And I would have people that would tell me, like, Brian, like, by the time you get them, they're done. Like, you got to get them younger. And I'm like, well, I do understand that. That's where I build, collaboration, because my leadership approach is going to go right over the little one's head. I have more of an aggressive, in your face type of approach when it comes to these adolescent young men. And I like to capture them there because I know where they currently are. I know they've already been somewhat undone. So I think, we as leaders, and I'm in the Black community, but also in the academic space, is as young as we can, being able to be that positive influence, that positive piece of the village. As I say this, I'm sitting looking out over the the yard where a lot of kids from the community come and play, because my yard beside my apartment is the largest green area in the whole community. So whereas lots of these kids are in a single parent household, they have no father figure. If they have a father figure, it's a toxic environment. I've heard it on a regular basis. I've seen it, police coming up and everything. I aim to be whatever you want to call it that pushes them in the other direction, because it's so easy for them to get caught up in the negativity. And then at the same time, it's so easy for us to see the negativity, because when you look at the press, when you look at media, they don't want to shine a light on the good stuff we're doing. They want to shine a light on the bad stuff. So what would you say, excuse me, Dr. Brown, what would you say, just from your perspective, is the most strategic approach based off of, your specific capacity you serve, in your professional life? What would you say is something that you intentionally aim to do to make sure to somewhat wave that next generation in the right path?
Right. Wow. So that's heavy, right? Talk about something lighter like the death penalty. But education is where I have to go, right? Now, many say that education is the great equalizer. I would say education equalizer, as it relates to Black and brown, to the majority groups or white, is very, very important to be educated. It's very, very important. But I would say that it helps, it diminishes but it's not an absolute, right? Because they see black skin, hair texture before they know that I am Dr. Brown, right? So I am perceived immediately by my outer. Education does help to trump that, but it's not an absolute, right? So in this topic, we talked about cultural relevance, right? And I speak a great deal about culturally relevant pedagogy, coined by Dr. Gloria Lasting Billings in the early 90s. When we consider education and we consider the education teaching staff across this country, 78 to 80% are white, and 80, 85 are female. Okay. However, when we consider culturally relevant pedagogy, we want to make sure that, and this is in regard to kids of color, all students, but kids of color, right? Is my conversation right now. But of course, all kids. To make sure that we are not in the business of firing teachers, we want to diversify our staff, but we also want to make sure that the ones that we have, that we educate them, that we make sure that they understand cultural relevancy, that it's not just a cliche, but they truly understand it, and that principals know what it looks like. And if they don't see it, they have the skill set to help their teachers grow to get that. When we look at cultural relevancy, we often think that it's something to do, but cultural relevancy from Dr. Gloria Lasting Billings' perspective, Geneva Gay, is a mindset. It is our view of who walk into our schools, our students, despite their zip code, despite their background, right? Despite their ethnicity of what they've been exposed to. Now, when we look at cultural relevancy, there are three pillars to cultural relevancy. First, academics. At the forefront is academic achievement. To be culturally relevant, we want to make sure that we are meeting all students at their readiness level and pulling them forward, meeting them where they are and pulling them forward. Number two, when we look at, back to number one, academic achievement. When we look at academic achievement, we know that our students are coming with, especially our students of color and our rural white students are coming with deficiencies. We want to be intentional. We want to be intentional about using high impact instructional strategies. We want to use research-based instructional strategies that we know work with a proven track record, not just do something for the heck of it, right? But high impact strategies. Why? Because we have students at the core. Why? Why do we exist? The purpose of education is to educate, to enhance our population. We haven't been doing a good job at that, right? The second pillar of cultural relevancy is teacher competency or cultural competency, making sure that teachers understand Daquan, Manuel, Jesus, Becky, everybody's what they bring into the classroom. When we consider that, we are doing what is also known as data-driven instruction, because we have looked at our population and we know that as relates to culture, there are different rituals, there are different behaviors, there are different beliefs, there are different thoughts, there are different perception, religion, those things and different things happening within the community. Those things have to be taken into consideration. Why? To ensure that we're educating all of our students. Why am I talking about this? Because we have established that education helps to make life better for our students, right? And the third pillar of culturally relevancy, colleagues, is socio-political. That in our classrooms, that is not just Benjamin Franklin and George Washington, but we're using all people, a cross-section of people in the classroom. Why do we want to do that? It helps with engagement. Students become more a part of it. They see mirrors of themselves. They get to see others, and others get to see them, right? So it benefits not just African Americans or Latinos, it also benefits white students. It benefits everyone, right? So to be culturally relevant helps to improve student outcomes. right? We must do a better job with educating the staff that we have. But at the same time, we do know there's an astonishing amount of research that suggests to have teachers of color greatly improve students' outcomes and to attend post-secondary institutions. John Hopkins.
Wow. Well, I guess we
Hey.
could just log off on that one. But I mean, that's I mean, what you're speaking about is a conversation that a lot of people try to get away from, because they're like, oh, we don't want to change the system, and we don't want to change it. We talk about this system, and we talk about education, and we talk about the importance of it, but we don't make sure that it's relevant to all our students. We don't build those necessary relationships like our teachers used to do with us, meeting you where you're at, but still making sure that you're successful, not doing a one size fits all. So everything that you're speaking about, everything that you're talking about is so relevant, but we tend to stay away from it. I don't know if it's because it's more work, or the kids aren't grasping, or what it's at, or maybe it's the consistency of the message. But
But when we do that, right? When we
mhm,
do that, it allows for a great deal of collateral damage, right?
right.
We know that educated people live longer, 7 to 10 years longer. Why? Not that just because you know the square root of nine, you are more likely to make better choices. You're more likely to have health care, right? When you feel a certain way, you're not reluctant to go to the doctor, right? It's the choices that you make, the foods that we eat, the behavior. You're less likely to smoke, right? So it's or risky behavior. So it allows for a great deal of collateral damage to not be intentional, to not be inclusive, to ensure that all students are benefiting from our educational arenas is essential. Whenever we do not, if I may, how does it impact the community? How does it impact the Black community? Well, all the research, or the most recent research, suggests that Black poverty rests on the shoulders of the Black male.
Mm.
Black poverty rests on the shoulders of Black males. Raj Chetty at Stanford and Richard Reed at Stanford University, in their research, suggest that, or their findings say that an African American woman is better off not marrying an African American man because her income plummets, her credit score plummets. That's my why. That is why I do what I do, right? We have not done a great job with educating our African American males, right? So it has also, as also speaking as a sociologist, it has also impacted the African American marriageable patterns. How? How? Because assortative dating. You're more likely, despite race, you're more likely to marry within your race, right? Blacks are more likely to marry, and the words are more likely. Whites are more likely to marry whites, and so on. Hispanics. Also, Brian, also, Dr. Sherry, you're more likely to marry others in your educated is more likely to marry educated, right? Well, guess who's less likely to have an educated partner? African American females. The more educated the African American female is, the less likely she will marry. Why? Because of how our African American males are falling off. Wow. Does that impact the sustainability of our community as we know it now? That is why.
Wow, wow.
Lecture, lecture, lecture.
I don't
Man,
mean
I'm
election.
telling you, and it's
Knowledge.
one of the reasons we had Dr. Hobson has someone that said something to her about the title of our podcast, the Black podcast,
Right.
insinuating that it's only for Black people.
Mm.
Black is not only for Black people. Black education, Black culturally competent, culturally relevant, anything along the cultural, like anything along that spectrum, it's not just for us, but it's
Nope.
for all of us, for you to better understand us, for you to better understand you and your history, and to better understand our perspective. One of our shows, we had we're discussing white privilege.
Mm.
In and of itself, white privilege isn't a bad thing, but how you use it dictates whether it's bad or not. If you use it for good, to like say, you know what, I would rather not apply for this position because I got a brother over there who, this is, you know, white man, white woman speaking. I've got a brother, I got a sister over there that I know is just as qualified. I love them. And I know if I were to apply for this simply based off of who I am, she won't get the position. So that's a way of using it for good. But we were speaking on we're speaking on the fact that when your history is a core requirement, but my history is an elective, that's when you know you got privilege. And living here in Mississippi, one of the things, or a phrase I like to use when it comes to individuals that are stuck on the knowledge basis of generations past, I call it intentional ignorance, because they don't desire to learn the culturally relevant information that can let them know that this person over here that don't look like me isn't exactly what great grandma Susie said that she was, has been passed down through the generations. So we have to have these school systems that keep teaching, or start to teach, the cultural relevance. And I remember I had to speak at a police training academy back in 2019 on cultural relevance. I was referred to them by LSU while I was working on my doctorate degree, first couple of years, and just some of the conversations that were had, you could tell that some of the things I was dropping was new information for some of the individuals. Because you can see like the whisper to the next person, yeah, and then I'm like, and you are about to go out here being a public servant for all of us,
Right.
and you don't have that type of knowledge.
Right.
And it's so sad that systems of the past are still being trained for people who are going to be doing work, you know, in the present, the not so distant future. And they're just simply not prepared, from education to profession, period. And I see your passion about the area, and I
Yeah.
praise that for sure.
Yeah. Thank you.
Absolutely. So we talk about, the amount or the number of African American males, or males and females that are in the world as far as superintendents, and that percentage is slim, right?
Yeah.
And I want you to talk about that journey a little bit with us on, going from being a educator to moving up to being a principal to being a superintendent, because a lot of people who aren't in that educational space, they think, oh, okay, he's a superintendent. That's like,
Right.
that's like just being a manager at Chick-fil-A or something. They just think that you just automatically get moved up, and that's
Right.
not what it's about. So I want you to really talk about that experience a little bit with us, because we've had a couple of superintendents on here. A couple of guests, two guests before that, he got his first superintendent job at 31 or 32. So he talked a little bit about his journey. Some people were in the right place at the right time. Did that stuff. So we want to know more about your journey of going
Right.
from being a lead, a principal, to now being the top man.
Right. Right. One of the top. Right. However, so I I began my career teaching at Southern University in Baton Rouge, and I eventually moved to Racine, where I taught in Racine for about 13 years. While teaching at the high school sociology, I got a phone call early in the AM, and it was from the deputy superintendent, saying that we want to move you to a middle school as the assistant principal. And my reply was, I didn't apply for that a principal job. And she said, but you have your master's and you have that. I said, no, no. And I say, by the way, I'm teaching right now. Okay, I'm teaching class. She said, don't worry about that. Right. I said, but no, no, no. So by noon, I was principal. I was assistant principal in
Just like
blue
that.
jeans. I remember I had this rugby shirt on, and I'm principal by 10 a.m. 10 or 12. Before noon, I was principal, assistant principal, and that's how I started, right? And as time progressed and the work, and learning from many around me, Mr. Thielen, Mr. Strack, just Miss Nola Ratliff, just many people. I was able to pick up their skill set, or I was hungry for it, right? Because I knew that I wanted to be more. But by being in that position, I also realized that I was having a bigger impact just from being the assistant principal. So then I was called in by the assistant superintendent, and I was moved to the high school in 2007. And in 2008, I was called to central office by the assistant superintendent, and they said, we're making you head principal. Oh, okay, I didn't apply for that, but I ended up that's how I became head principal of Gilmore Middle School in Racine, Wisconsin, and the longest serving principal of Gilmore Middle School in Racine. And while serving as principal in Gilmore Middle School, I became really, really concerned about what I was seeing, and I wanted to do better, right? And I wasn't necessarily getting what I needed, or I felt what I needed from others. So I just started to just read and go to conferences and really latch on and read until my friends start calling me Browns and Nobles. Just they did. And so I ended, and so people started to. I became principal of the year. We closed the achievement gap. We got all this notice, write ups, and things. And may I add, though, I haven't said this. I haven't said that yet. Even though I'm getting these accolades for principal, I'm still Brian. I'm still Hobson is more concerned trying to be John Coltrane and Miles Davis because I am a jazz musician. I had right, so I run a street. So look, I'm getting excited. I'm stepping up now. So I got 3 gigs tomorrow, well, this weekend. So I play tenor saxophone, some quartet, or sometimes the quintet. So everybody's talking about this, but I'm worried about Miles and Charlie Parker. And it's like, this is lightweight, but when Marcella's and Branford, this is, that was driving me crazy. And I was in bars and playing and just trying. My wife is saying, I married a school teacher, not Coltrane, or you're not a musician. I'm still so dust the things on my fingers. This is called carpal tunnel, right? From
Oh.
right, so right, so it's far from a hobby, right? So don't call it a hobby.
Yes, sir.
So, right. So while doing that, I ended up in Columbia, Missouri, again recruited, right, to help Columbia, Missouri with the racial tension that they were enduring, right, because I had been doing some work in Madison, Wisconsin, around racial issues within the school, justified anger, working alongside of Dr. Gloria Lasson Billings and many others, scholars at UW Madison, or the Urban League in Madison. So I learned a lot from them, and I took that, right, and put it in my back pocket. And eventually I'm recruited to go to Missouri to be assistant superintendent. So it was based on the things and some of the track records, and being noticed from the work that was happening around me. Got noticed and people recruited.
Wow. Wow. Well, wow. So being in that space, like you said, everything looks like it happened fairly quickly. Um, and some things that we think are common sense, like when when we're putting all this stuff together of plans and the right way of teaching and building relationships, you would think that a lot of people would already know that, and you go and do it so naturally, and they're like making a big deal. You're like, we should have been doing this, right?
Right.
But hey,
Yeah.
God puts us in certain situations to do certain
Right.
things, and
Right.
sometimes it doesn't make sense to us, but it makes sense overall.
Well,
Um,
I think my purpose is because of what I stated earlier about my childhood and what I experienced in the
yeah,
ACEs, and I realized that a lot of people, um, I validate them or just from what I say, or just the fact that I say it. Right, I won't
right,
necessarily say I validate them, but uh, to have that courageous conversation to disclose the things, the yuckies that I endure,
yeah,
someone always comes up and say thank you, right? Right. So um, I own it, right? So
right,
yes, it was horrible going through, but to help you deal with it, I own it. I don't allow it to hold me hostage, right? So
right.
I own it.
Absolutely. I love that. I love that. So, can you talk about your leadership skills going into these situations as a superintendent and now being over so many schools? I don't know how many schools that you have in your area, but what was that conversation? Were people really open to the change that you were implementing? What was the current situation prior to you being there, and where y'all, where is it at now? What you're doing or plans you have?
So as the deputy superintendent, we did. Uh, I am the number two of the district. So there's the superintendent, and he came in with a transformational leadership, and this was driven by some of the inequities that were seen in the data for a period of years. This is also driven by the outcomes for students of color. So when we look at the school district that I'm currently working in, it is 60% Hispanic or 57% Hispanic, 38% African American. The two population that tends to suffer the most from education, right? So when you look at uh, several years um, of not being successful students, right? The superintendent felt the need to make some changes, transformational changes for the purpose of enhancing the outcomes for students.
Wow, wow, Brian.
Over here trying to take care of some spammers we got in our comment section. But ultimately, what I want to, before we get ready to close out, what I kind of want to know is what are some things that you currently do, or do you, as far as your school system goes, do you do any type of collaborations with other administrators as far as putting together workshops, like in the area that is being needed, seeing that you can kind of look at what's going on from like what are some of
Right,
those types of workshops that you do, how frequently do you do them, so on and
right,
so forth.
right. Yes. Matter of fact, Brian, we had one today from
Nice.
for 4 hours workshop, and in this workshop is this is tailored to administrators, to principals, and the purpose is to sharpen the skills of your principals. You want your principals to be savvy leaders. Why? Because they're responsible for so many lives. So I am a high school district only, and the high schools roughly between 1900 to 2100 students each. So you want, and again, I'll disclose the demographics. So you want to make sure that our principals are savvy instructors that are able to lead the buildings, able to enhance instructions in the classrooms, right? And we also have partnerships with post-secondary institutions surrounding colleges, also to help us, and we partner with them for the purpose of, again, making sure that we are on track uh, to educate our students to endure post-secondary institutions. The feeder schools, we have like as a result of us being a high school district only, we have 7 or 8 feeder school districts that come into our school district. So it is important that from the elementary, middle schools to high school to college, that we are connected and that we are working together for the good of our students, because we do know that um, uh, the majority of students, once they leave high school or at college, they remain in the area. So that all sectors of the educational arena are working together for the good of the community and the population, working together with the school district. So there are partnerships.
Wow.
I love it. I love it. I love it. It takes me back to I was doing interviews, some quantitative, no, I was doing, I guess you would say, mixed methods, doing some
Mhm.
interviews at my former high school, and I was talking to the assistant principal, and we're just talking about discipline because I had recently visited the alternative school, talked to the administrators over there, and I remember speaking to this assistant principal, which he was also over behavioral management, and I was saying how I'm looking to help the district put together some trauma focused,
Yes.
or to put together some programming that views these kids through a trauma focused lens.
Yes.
And she looked at me like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Seriously? Seriously. And it's simply a lack of cultural competence. She has
Yeah.
no idea
No
what
idea.
these kids deal with at home, but when they get to school, she wants to lay certain disciplines on them without knowing what is the root of it. So that's one of the reasons why it's just so important to be culturally competent, at least to a level to where, as the book implies, you ask different questions. You don't
Yeah.
ask the same questions that you ask everybody else. It
Yes.
makes me think about the animation where you got like the elephant and the dog and the fish, and they were saying like your grade is going to be dependent on your ability to climb that tree.
Right. It benefits all. It benefits all. I'll say this here.
Exactly.
You made me think of when I was becoming a principal, right? So you have to do your practicum hours. So sometimes when principals were absent, they would say, "Well, Kevin, I'm absent. I want you to serve in my place. This will satisfy your university." Simply, simply because I will put the walkie-talkie on, like the principal, students, white students and black students, they would ask me if I was a hall monitor, right? So that I would go from school teacher to hall monitor. They didn't even think about me being serving as principal for today, right? So
Mhm.
those things like that speaks to that cultural competence, right? Because the students did not see people of color in administrative roles, right? So you'll be amazed at just those small things that gives you an opportunity to measure the importance of being culturally competent, as you stated. But it also happened with adults, right? What are you today, right? Why
Yeah.
do you have that walkie-talkie on? So not used to seeing people of color in administrative roles or managerial roles
Yeah.
has been a concern.
Absolutely. And I something similar to what you're talking about as well as Brian. Even when I worked, when I graduated with my doctorates, prior to that, I was, well, I was an educator, but I did PE. And so when I graduated, um, it was harder for the teachers and the admin to adapt to me doing something different, And so when I graduated,
Yeah.
I was at a predominantly a predominantly white school, and so I was sitting there, and in our culture, we're taught to, you pray about it. We don't want any
Right. Right.
confrontation. We don't want any problems. So you just learn how to pick your battles. So I mean, it took almost a whole year for them to transition from calling me coach to calling me Dr. Hobson. And
Uh,
so I would have admin come to me and say, "Well, I'm just so used to calling you coach." It's like, I had to literally write a whole page and a half email on the importance of education.
right.
And we are inspiring our students to, higher learning thinking and all these things. But then as admin and educators, we're thinking on a small scale.
Yeah.
let's go.
Right.
And so
Right.
it took them,
Mm.
it took someone, a Caucasian man. I was sitting there talking to him, and one of the assistant principals walked by, and she said, "Hi, Mister," called his name, and she goes, "Hey, Coach." And so he was so upset. I mean, he was more upset than I was, and it's my degree. And so he said, "This woman, whether you feel that she deserves it or not, she has earned this degree,
Right.
you know."
Right.
And so it just took them so long to adapt. And then one assistant principal said, she said, "Wow, that's so amazing. So did you like go to a university or?"
Wow.
I'm like,
Wow.
"You're the admin of the school and you're
Right.
asking us."
Right.
So I told her I went to Walmart,
Right.
because
IO2. IO2. Walmart.
I said, "You better hurry up because they're going out of stock." But it was just, and I was just kept thinking, "Oh my gosh!" Like,
Yeah.
and we're supposed to be leading our students, and even now as an athletic coordinator at my new position in a new place, um, these kids aren't used to seeing a black woman always dressed up. So why
Yeah.
are you always dressed up? You're an
And where are
athletic
you
coordinator. You
going?
should look like a coach. And so teaching them, if they don't see any other black woman
Yeah.
as dressed up, it has to be me. I tell people all the time, I don't lead by example, I am the example.
Exactly.
So, yes, you can be a student athlete. Yes, you can be all these things, but you're also a woman first. And
Yeah.
so, teaching them, this is how you speak when you're talking to somebody. This is the things that you say. If you don't know, it's okay to ask a question. You don't have to act like you know everything. We have in this culture that, you fake it till you make it. Well, some people have been faking for a very long time. And so
Right.
we have to teach our kids, well, if you don't know, you need to ask. It doesn't mean you're stupid, doesn't mean and so I think that's a part of just our culture as well. Making culture, our education culturally relevant is
Yeah.
making sure that we are the example when they see, okay, Dr. Brown he's very vulnerable, he's gone through X, Y, and Z. If he can make it, I can make it. If she can make it, I can make it. And that's what education is supposed to be. We're supposed to be the example that they see, whether you're black or you're white. Even if you're white and you don't relate to your students, showing them that you do research, that you ask questions, or
Right.
asking the right questions, because some questions aren't the right questions. I've had some, I had the other day, I was sitting at this restaurant and this guy said, "Okay, I got to ask you." And I was like, he better
Here
not
we go.
he better out of his mouth better not be something crazy. and, so, and so I just think that's also important when we talk
Yeah.
about training and professional development is you can work and you can be an influencer, you can be an impact to a positive impact to these students, but you have to ask the right questions as well
Right.
and know what to say to our students and what not to say to our students, because it can easily get flipped into something totally different. So I just really appreciate the fact that you are, as a leader, that you're vulnerable and that you make sure that your, teachers and principals also can see who you are in your story, because they also need to, live up to their full potential so that our students can live up to their full potential. And so I
And when
really
you and
appreciate you
when you're
doing that.
culturally relevant, in closing, if I may, if you're culturally relevant, we shouldn't have aha moments. We shouldn't be having aha moments about hidden figures. We shouldn't
Mhm.
have aha moments. Oh, Tulsa, Oklahoma, I didn't know. We shouldn't have aha moments about Juneteenth, right? Right. If when we are culturally relevant, it is in our curriculum.
Curriculum. Wow. Well, we appreciate you so much.
Thank you.
Um, do you have any books or any projects or anything that we need to support you in?
Well, I don't have any books, right? Many people ask me that, but I do have a website, and it is Dr. Kevin Brown. And I do have a website where I do write articles and do research. My research is grounded in college and career readiness and the importance of mathematics. Mathematics is the number one predictor of college readiness. Mathematics is the number one reason why all students, despite their race or socioeconomic status, drop out of college, right? So yeah, if you look up Dr. Kevin Brown, you will see my website on, and you'll see many articles about the importance of cultural relevancy, adverse childhood events, just many things.
Thank you for that. Well, we'll make sure that um, just like everything else that you fell into, I'm sure the book is going to be coming out soon. And we're going to be
Yeah,
like, we need to get that book, and we're going to make sure that our audience
yeah,
shares it. But
yeah,
we really appreciate you. And
absolutely.
we thank you for just being you and continuing to break down those barriers, because we, Brian and I, we look up to people like you, and we know that the higher you go, the higher we can go. And so it's
Right.
so important that our students and our teachers and principals see more people of color in positions like you. And so continue to do what you're doing, because we are right behind you. We're going to be right beside you, and we're going to be at the top together.
Hey,
So thank you
Sir,
for that.
I appreciate it. A pleasure meeting both of
question:
you. Yes, sir.
is there somewhere we can go to hear that music?
That's what we
I,
really
I
need to
can send it
do.
to you. I can send you
Okay.
some, right?
Beautiful. Sounds
Okay.
good. Sounds good.
Right. Yes.
Awesome.
All
Well, thank
right.
you so much. We're going to put you in the backstage real quick while we close out. And
Absolutely.
then, but we will make sure that we are continuing to support, and we are now family. So we thank you for being a
Thank
part
you.
of the Black Podcast family.
Absolutely. Hey, Sherry. Hey, Ryan.
All right.
Awesome. I mean, wow. I mean, once he started getting into the flow, he was on it, huh? Sometimes,
Hmm.
as people start, when you can tell when someone is really passionate about the things that they're doing and why they're doing it. And in education, I believe that a lot of times, a lot of teachers and principals or leaders that have come into education because we were passionate about it, right? But through all of the drama and the politics and all those things, it ended up, a lot of teachers and a lot of leaders started to lose their why, started to lose their passion and why they wanted to be in education. So it's good to see him as a superintendent just still having that passion, and very involved on in what his campuses are doing, as well as leadership. So I think it's just so important. You're making all these
Yeah.
weird faces that you don't do what you're doing.
Yeah, and it makes me think also, us becoming or coming into more higher and higher and higher positions of, along the academic spectrum and even in government, can help us kind of bridge that gap of funding as well, because a lot of times these teachers lose their passion for teaching because they don't have the resources to be as impactful as
Or
they
the
desire.
support.
So
Or the
yeah,
support.
so much that goes into it, and each week we can do as much as we can, and that's why we continue to bring on more and more individuals that are able to be, that extra arm that we can hold along this journey. So off that
Absolutely.
note, that's our show for today, and we'll be back here next week. Guys, I know y'all don't know yet, but we got a plethora of guests already ready to jump in front of y'all. So 2022 is going to pop off nice and smooth. So stay tuned, continue to share the information, continue to reach out. If you have any questions, if you have a certain type of guest that you want to see, don't hesitate to reach out, and we'll see what we can make happen. But off that
Yes.
note,
And also make sure you check out our website. We are hsba.com. We are SAREHSBA.com, and you can learn more about what we're doing, not only on the Black Podcast, but what we're doing within our organization of Hobson and Streak Business Association. So again, we are HSBA, and you will find out more information on the Black Podcast, as well as everything that we're doing in the Black community pertaining to our Black males and education. So we look forward to collaborating partnerships as well. So see you guys soon next Thursday here, and do your part and share this video.
all right, y'all take care.